Praise ye Yahweh, sing unto Yahweh. So praising Yahweh, singing to him, right? A new song. And his praise in the congregation of saints, Israelite. Let Israel rejoice in him that made him. Let the children of the remembered ones, to Zion one, be joyful in their king. Let them praise his name, Yahweh. In the dance, let them sing. See, praise and sings in the same sentence. Sing praises unto him with the timbrel and the harp. For Yahweh taketh pleasure in his people, the Israelites. He will beautify the meek, we the meek, with salvation. He's going to save us, the elect. Salvation means to be saved from impending danger, right? Delivered from impending danger. Let the saints be joyful in glory. Let them sing or praise. Let them sing aloud upon thy beds. We're going to be getting up in the morning. So we're going to get up in the morning singing. And you're going to get up, you lay with one of your wives or concubines or whatever. So when we get up in the morning, we're going to have a smile on our face. That's what Psalm 149 is talking about. When we get up in the morning, we're going to be singing and dancing. We're going to go to sleep happy. We're going to get up happy. We're going to eat happy. Every time we eat some food, it's going to be good. So a typical morning in the kingdom, the first coming to America. Akeem, he was in the kingdom of heaven. So that's how we're going to be. We're going to be able to communicate with the animals. And you other nations, number one on the list, going to be you Edomite. You're going to be out in the field, getting your ass whipped, working your ass off. To Psalm 149, and so we're going to wake up praising the Most High in our beds. When we go to sleep, we're going to go to sleep happy. We're going to get a good night's sleep too. We ain't going to be waking up in the middle of the night coughing or going to the bathroom. There's a saying, waking up on the wrong side of the bed. We're going to wake up on the right side of the bed every day. Yeah. We're going to wake up on the right side of the bed. Our Johnsons are going to be at attention. Your women are going to be fine, no blemishes whatsoever. All your wives are going to be perfect. And all your wives are going to be virgins. And they're all going to be young. And none of them are going to commit adultery with you. The 7 women shall take hold of one man. It's going to happen on this side, brother. And it's going to continue to happen on the other side. Hey, the scripture said we're going to raise his name in the dance, right?
Psalm 149. Praise ye the Lord. Sing unto the Lord a new song, and his praise in the congregation of saints. Let Israel rejoice in him that made him. Let the children of Zion be joyful in their king. Let them praise his name in the dance. Let them sing praises unto him with the timbrel and harp. The Lord taketh pleasure in his people. He will beautify the meek with salvation. Let the saints be joyful in glory. Let them sing aloud upon their beds. Let the high praises of God be in their mouth, and a two-edged sword in their hand, to execute vengeance upon the heathen, and punishments upon the people, to bind their kings with chains and their nobles with fetters of iron, to execute upon them the judgment written. This honor have all his saints. Praise ye the Lord.
Good morning, Your Highness.
All right. Right, Shalom. First and foremost, I would like to give all praise, honor, and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rakakwadash, And double honors unto the apostles and the elders of GMS who rule well, teach well, being great examples towards younger brothers. And peace and blessings and salutations to the hopeful lake out there pushing his word in truth and in sincerity across the four winds in the name of Yahweh Bashem Shai, pushing to get up out of here. Shalom to the hopeful lake, the believers, the listeners who have came back to the obedience of the scriptures through faith in Yahweh Bashem Shai. All right. And what I want to get into today, is a World War III update and understanding these last few days. There's been a lot happening. A lot of misinformation. A lot of false narratives. A lot of war propaganda. All right, and we're just gonna unpack some things and get caught up to where we are now. And Lord will, this is edifying. To you brothers, all right, and you sisters tuned in. Now, I want to get a couple precepts just to lay the foundation, and then some videos we're going to get into. Now, when you go here, this is the book of Proverbs, chapter 4, verse 7. It says, wisdom is the principal thing, therefore get wisdom, and with all thy getting, get understanding. Okay, because wisdom is the principal thing, which we, have been blessed. The Lord has blessed us with this wisdom in these times. And as we get this wisdom, this knowledge, we begin to increase in what understanding. Because there's a lot of people, who think they got it and don't have a clue, what's going on. Okay. They do not have an understanding of what's happening in real time. Okay. And that's why, a lot of people are so easily tossed to and fro. Okay. Because as we in the age of information, knowledge shall run to and fro. Okay. Well, the Lord has to bless us with the ability to make understanding of this information that's going forth. Knowing to have discernment, when to, dismiss, particular information, and how to cipher, particular information. Okay. So we're going to continue to go into the understanding, the things that we're seeing real time, and tie it back into the scriptures. Now, when you go into Isaiah 34 and 16, okay, it says, seek ye out the book of the Lord and read, no one of these shall fail, none shall want her mate, for my mouth it have commanded, and his spirit it have gathered them. Okay, so we know none of these prophecies are going to fail, no matter what they report, in the news. Okay, no matter what, people are saying on, social media and TikTok. Well, we know prophecy is not going to fail, because this whole thing with this ceasefire, which, you know, is so much confusion going on amongst that, and we're gonna, bring as much clarity, as possible to that. But even with that, just the word ceasefire, it has people feeling, secure, that there's not going to be any war. Well, according to prophecy, there is going to be war. Okay, so the hell with what, a news, all right, outlet, some news station says that there's not going to be any war. We know, according to prophecy, what it's going to be. Okay, with no doubt. Now let's go here, because we're seeing the will of the Lord, all right, happen, real time. Okay, and matter of fact, let's get this in the book of Matthew. Because we said, we spoke about an offering. I don't know, you brothers and sisters, if you tuned in to the last, World War III update, you know, that we talked about the offering, when this escalation, when this conflict first started, when this broke out between the small hats and Iran, we spoke about them, all right, having an offering. And we're going to revisit that word offering. Okay. And this is what, these nations, this is what they're trying to do, mainly the small hats, all right, because they're getting pummeled, okay, and them niggas need, a timeout, okay, so they're trying to go to this off ramp, to regroup. Now, when you go to Matthew 24, and in 6, it says, and ye, let's just read verse 6, and ye shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you be not troubled. You say, because these things don't trouble us, man. This is why people are so excited about a ceasefire, because news of war had a lot of people troubled. Okay, people was pissed at Trump. People was irate. Okay, so people were troubled, man, because all their hope is in this place continuing on. See, war is not good news if your belief is in America, man. Okay, if your interest, all right, lines up with America being up and running, war, all right, is not good news for you. Okay, but as we know, everything that we, believe in and hope in is based on America, okay, being destroyed. Okay, that's the beginning of our faith, is America being destroyed. So when you read on, it says, "For all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet." Okay, and we have to remember, we're going to continue to hear of these wars and rumors of wars. Okay, and that doesn't mean that the end is going to be immediately when we hear news of a war. Now, we do understand that this is a sign of the times, the fact that we're hearing wars or rumors of wars. Okay, and the war that we just witnessed, between the small hats and Iran, that was a prelude of what's to come. And it shows you how all these other nations are going to get involved, okay, and when that war finally, escalates to the point, of no return. Okay. So we look at these things and we have to, as we watch these prophecies, we still have to, apply patience, man. And I know like you get into these things and it's exciting, and then you hear a ceasefire and it could be disheartening. Because the scriptures say, um, hope deferred maketh the heart sick. Okay, so it's like everything that we um, want is based on this war, escalate. So when you see anything that looks, you hear about de-escalation, man, it can be disheartening. And this comes from experience of just following these things and thinking that this is it, time after time, and it de-escalate to understand that it's still a level of patience, that the Lord requires as we watch these things unfold, and these things do uplift us because what happens when they do this, when they escalate, then it opens up doors. It opens up other doors for other things to happen, for this thing to really be the end. Okay, because we're here at the end. Now it's just, the Lord just fine tuning and putting everything in place needed, to close this thing out. Okay, now I want to go here. All right, just to get this word off ramp, the meaning in the military, and this is what we're seeing happening now. Trump is trying to go. Trump is trying to, all right, take an off ramp to this conflict, this escalation. Okay, it says in the context of war or conflict, an off ramp refers to a potential way to de escalate the situation and find a peaceful resolution, allowing parties to avoid further conflict or bloodshed. Is essentially an exit strategy or a peaceful compromise offered as an alternative to continue fighting. Okay, so this is what we're seeing America is trying to do. All right, and we have to understand, people give Trump credit for this and credit for that. Trump is not, just coming up with these decisions by himself. Okay, he has a think tank. He has certain risk assessment. Okay, people set up to tell him how to move and when to move. Okay, and you best believe they've been looking at this back and forth with Iran and the small hats, and they told this man like, look, this ain't the war we want. Okay, but eventually the Lord gonna make them go forth with this. Okay, but right now they're really trying to back down from these things. Okay, because they understand that there's gonna be grave consequences. They understand, because Russia and China showed who they was with. Okay, and this just brings more, all right, credibility to the scriptures, because the scripture said that Magog was going to be a guard, okay, unto to these nations, man. You see? So just to see these things unfold, all right, we have to understand, the Lord is showing us a prelude of what it's going to look like. There's going to come a time when America is really, going to get heavily engaged into this war, okay? And these other players are going to jump in, okay? So let's go here. I got the video I want to get. Uh, yes, so let's go here. Let's play this. And they're going to expound, because what Western media does, they take something small, okay, and they make it into something huge. Or they do the vice versa, take something huge and make it into something small, whatever works in their favor for their narrative. Now, what America is running with this narrative is just what Trump did is if he just obliterated Iran's nuclear program. Okay? That's the story that they're running with. As if, all right, what America did just came in and just obliterated the nuclear program. Now Iran, is crippled. They don't have a nuclear program anymore. So there's no sense of, the back and forth between the small hats and Iran. Like America just stepped in and just solved the problem, and it's peace now. And that's the narrative that they're running with. And it making, Trump look like this great hero. Okay. And that plays also into people trusting Trump more for this MOTB system that they're going to roll out in America, man. They're going to roll out in the earth. Okay. But they're using Trump to get the trust of you Americans for this MOTB. Okay. So this is another, another gimmick, okay, to get people, all right, to trust more, okay, in government. Okay. So let's play this. We'll commentate, as needed.
Well, who could have seen this coming? Pretty much everyone who's been paying.
Now, this is before the ceasefire, and then we're going to, just going back a couple of days and making sense of things that we've seen, the things that we've heard. So this is before the so-called ceasefire. Say so-called ceasefire,
Paying attention. The president launching 3 strikes against Iranian nuclear facilities. Details piling in now that most of them were empty, perhaps. Anyway, didn't stop the president from taking to the airwaves to say it was a spectacular success. Watch this.
Tonight, I can report to the world that the strikes were a spectacular military success.
So we've been digesting all of this. Benjamin Netanyahu coming out praising this strike, this attack. Neocons and warhawks all over media over the past number of hours saying this is absolutely spectacular, that in many ways President Trump is like Ronald Reagan. This is a Thatcher-Reagan moment.
And what Donald Trump just did is not only historic, but they've just protected the entire earth. Donald Trump just prevented World War III by using the United States military to stop it.
What does Russia do in all of this? Who President Putin issued a warning. Don't even think about regime change, sending nuclear scientists as well as Russian officials to these different nuclear sites. Were they killed in any of these attacks? To analyze all of this, we want to bring in former UN Weapons Inspector Scott Ritter, who knows more about this than just about anybody. Scott, good to see you. Now that you've had a number of hours to digest this craziness, where do we stand with where do we stand with, first of all, the assessment of these attacks? What do you make of that?
Well, I mean, all I could think of in as the information came in, do you remember that old Wendy's commercial from the 1980s maybe, or 1990s? The old lady, where's the beef? Where's the beef?
Old ladies. Yeah.
And that's all I could. I'm going, wait a minute, Mr. President, you took the most sophisticated strike package available to the United States military. And you flew American troops into harm's way to bomb two facilities that were already bombed twice by the Israelis, and anything of value that could be salvaged would have been removed. And to bomb another facility that the Iranians have been led to believe you were going to bomb for 9 days now. So therefore, there was nothing in there. Why did you bomb 3 empty facilities, Mr. President? Why? And that's the question, everybody. This is a grand act of theater. This is the theater of the absurd. Let's take a look at the Iranian program. You remember Tulsi Gabbard recently got in some hot water with the internet, social media, because she had testified before Congress back in March that the Iranian government continued not to be pursuing a nuclear weapons program, and no decision had been made to cross that threshold. She also said that we're very concerned, we being the United States, very concerned about the accumulation of capabilities and rhetoric inside Iran that suggested the fatwa could be reversed, prohibiting nuclear weapons. People tend to forget that aspect of her speech when they condemned her, when she came out and said the president's contention that Iran, could have a nuclear weapon is a valid contention. It is. I wrote an article back in October of last year that said the exact same thing. This has been known, but what we do know is the Iranians have been bending over backwards to eliminate that concern. On the eve of Israel's Pearl Harbor type strike, the Iranians were saying, we're ready to sign a treaty rather than have you rely upon a fatwa, an internal religious political statement. We're willing to sign a binding international treaty that we will not be pursuing nuclear weapons. We're willing to enter a binding agreement that limits our enrichment to 3.75%, on and on and on. But the things that Tulsi was concerned about, and the president claimed to be concerned about, the 60% enriched uranium, we didn't blow that up. That's been secured and removed to different sites that we don't know where it's at. You know that uranium conversion plant that we blew up in Isfahan, that had been evacuated of all of its critical infrastructure prior to the destruction too. Firdos, home to the IR-6 and IR-8 advanced centrifuges for enrichment capacity, that was evacuated. Iran's been producing advanced centrifuges, IR-6, IR-8, without the international community knowing how many they've produced for some months now, which means all around Iran, there are underground facilities we don't know anything about that had these centrifuges in there. So for the president to come out and say, I have destroyed Iran's capabilities, is the biggest lie in the world. He bombed 3 empty facilities. And what the Iranians are saying about Fordo is true. We just dented it. We didn't break it. We didn't penetrate it. We didn't destroy it massively. It's still there intact. We damaged the entrance and we damaged one of the exits. There's 5 exits, by the way, so it's not as though the facility is shut down. This is theater. And then you have to ask your question, why did the president undertake such a dramatic action? According to CNN.
So, nigga lying, man. All right. Just to be blunt. Okay. And they get on, CNN and these, major news networks of the West, they just push this propaganda, as if they just devastated Iran. You got people on TikTok going crazy, rallying behind Trump, the military, making videos, these little young niggas, and you got young Eve in the military, as if America just went over there with great triumph. Okay. And the reason he's going to go into it, all right, because Trump, they targeted, America targeted 2 buildings that was already bombed, about 10 days ago, 10, 11 days ago by the small hats, so their facility was already evacuated. And then Fordo, which they've been telegraphing, they've been running, everybody knows about Fordo, so if us in America, all right, the common people in America know about Fordo being the main, underground nuclear facility of Iran. You think Iran is going to leave, all that, high tech, equipment that they use, or centrifuge that they use to produce uranium. They're gonna leave it there. Okay, so this was theater. Okay, this was politics, and the fact that they did this, was to make it seem as if, to save face, for America aiding Israel. Okay, for America to show, some type of strength and posture in the situation when they really don't have any. Okay, and it was a sign to Iran that look, America really not trying to escalate. They talk to each other through these strikes. All right, and the fact that they did something, so irrelevant as far as Iran's ability, to produce uranium, and also Iran's ability to continue on, okay, in this war with the small hats. They did something that was absolutely irrelevant, all right, to both causes, okay, and it showed the Iranians, okay, America really don't want to escalate. They really don't want to get involved. Even though they're helping the small hats, they don't want to get directly involved. Okay, and then you had Iran. They did a missile strike on Qatar, or U.S. air base, and they only sunk 11 missiles. Okay, and they gave America the heads up so they can shoot them down, just so the public can see this back and forth between America and Iran, so they can get that out the way. Okay, so now people have seen that back and forth, and America is able to walk away as if they've done this great triumph. Okay, but it wasn't a thing. It wasn't an attack for escalation. It was an attack for political purpose. Okay, and one thing about Donald Trump, he knows how to spin clout. He knows how to get clout off on something very minuscule. He knows how to draw clout from, and that's what he's done. Okay, so he's gonna play some more. He's gonna expound on some of these things as well.
The United States has communicated to Iran that this is a limited action and there will be no additional strikes. Now, the president said that if Iran doesn't surrender and all that, there will be more strikes and they'll be greater and they'll be easier and all that kind of stuff. But the bottom line is this strike appears to have been designed so the United States could save face. It's a big nothing burger. Where's the beef?
So save face for who? Because if Iran knows that this was a big nothing burger, who are we saving face from? The Israelis? I mean, so Iran's sitting there. They know
Trump.
They know the truth.
Trump. This is about saving. First of all, when we speak of Donald Trump, we can only think about one thing: Donald Trump. He doesn't care about America. He doesn't care about American security. He doesn't care about Israel. He doesn't care about any of that. He only cares about Donald Trump. This is a man who has been running around. I mean, first of all, he got himself in hot water by using the royal we when he talked about Israel's attack against Iran, thereby directly implicating himself and this country. He then made some outlandish statements about unconditional surrender, the potential of regime change, which immediately, drew the rebuke of Russia. Don't even think about regime change. And the Iranians saying, bring it on. We're not worried about you. And so basically Iran was ignoring him. He was demanding that Iran roll over and pee on itself and agree to 0% enrichment and all this. And Iran just said pound sand, and they kept hitting Israel. And so Trump needed a way out of this. This was a humiliation for Donald Trump. So this strike is Donald Trump's defining moment, his moment of glory, his greatest military victory in the history of military victories, according to him. But it was a nothing burger. Where's the beef? Didn't destroy anything.
Ready to take the next step in your education journey? At the University of Southern Mississippi, you can earn a degree on your time, 100% online.
It's a great point. Now, what about the rest of where do things stand, do you believe, with their nuclear enrichment? I mean, it seems like from Tulsi Gabbard's comments, the IAEA, even Russia's own Vladimir Putin yesterday or 2 days ago, sending a message saying, I've told Israel repeatedly that Iran has no nuclear weapons and they have no intentions of creating nuclear weapons. So I guess I'm just so confused. I don't understand. What are we bombing then? What are we trying to bomb? If there are no nuclear weapons and they don't intend to do that, what are we doing? And what's left?
Well, the Israeli exercise was always an exercise in regime change, using the nuclear program as an excuse. The United States, less so. We were there. I mean, the plan that Trump bought in on and he signed off on, that Israel executed, was a regime change plan. Decapitation of critical leadership, shock and awe, and demoralizing by striking nuclear targets, and compelling the Iranians to confront the fact that they had lost, that their gamble had. Netanyahu spoke about this often. He said, I will use the Nasrallah against Iran. They tried to kill Ali Khamenei. They failed, but they killed a lot of other people. The Nasrallah model is leadership decapitation followed by sustained targeting of follow-on leadership, to the point where the people lose confidence in the leadership and the system collapses. That's what he wanted to have happen. Trump bought into it, and it failed. Within 24 hours, Israel's getting the snot pounded out of it by Iranian missiles, and they haven't stopped getting the snot pounded out of them ever since. Right now, there's a real concern that Israel is indefensible in a couple of days. They run out of interceptor missiles, and if Iran doesn't run out of missiles, then Iran achieves a strategic victory. So why did they do this? Trump wants to back out of this, I believe. I think he needed to get disengaged from this. So he did this action, and this now gives him the ability to say, all right, the nuclear program is destroyed, even though it's not. I'll touch that in a minute. And therefore, it's incumbent upon Israel and Iran to resolve their issues. But I don't have a say in this anymore, because my concern was this nuclear program, which my magnificent bombers, dropping the biggest bombs in the world with the most destructive potential, have completely demolished. And Iran came out and said, you didn't do anything. You didn't do anything, which means that the impetus on Iran, the pressure on Iran to retaliate, has been, it's not there. Not a single regional base was used in support of this attack. Not a single American military resource in the Middle East was used in support of this attack. Everything that was used to support this attack were assets controlled by Strategic Command or Pacific Command. Central Command had no role in this attack whatsoever, which means there's deniability, which means it's difficult for the Iranians to speak of retaliation. If the Iranians retaliated, then they're the ones escalating and creating, the problems. This is a chance for Iran to walk away from the concept of having to retaliate against the United States.
Where do you see the escalation ladder going from here? So if Iran sits back, does not touch American bases, but continues to bomb the hell out of Israel, if you watch Fox News, if you watch any of the legacy media, they're telling us that most of their ballistic missiles are now destroyed. Their ability to attack Israel is vastly incapacitated. Israel is just days away from virtually ending this thing, and that Iran is basically, inept at this point, and cannot hit Israel. So what's your assessment? Is that a total lie?
I don't know. What have you seen, Clayton? I mean, because I've seen sensitive intelligence facilities struck with great precision. I've seen Iran move away from firing mass attacks using 20-year-old missiles, in order to exhaust Israeli missile defense capabilities, to shifting to more focused attacks using modern missiles that penetrate the missile defense shield at will and strike the most sensitive targets in Israel. They did it today. They're going to do it tomorrow. They're going to do it Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. They're going to continue to do it because Iran has a tremendous amount of missiles and missile launchers. Iran has been preparing for this very conflict for 20 years. For 20 years, they've been preparing for this. And it appears that their strategy is working. Fox News can spin it any way they want to. The Israelis can spin it any way they want to. But it's very difficult to accept the spin when they say, "Oh, the Iranians have run out of missiles." Boom! Oh, well, there went the Unit 8200 computer processing center in Beersheba. Gosh, I guess they didn't run out of that missile. The bottom line is the Iranians have thousands of missiles left, They have hundreds of launchers. They have dispersed this capability all around the country. There is no single place that can be hit to bring this to an end, and it will never end for Israel.
I guess, where do you think things over the next 48 hours, Scott? Where, as we head into Monday and Tuesday of this week, what do you?
So yeah, just to go into it, as he was saying, all right. First of all, they'll say that the attack by America, as he called it, was a nothing burger. All right, which was more political than anything. So now they can just make these claims of what they've done. They've they weakened Iran to where Iran can't respond. And then Iran responded. They attacked. They did a strike on Israel, hours after, America did a strike on them, to show you that they didn't do anything, to Iran's capability, okay, to continue to just pummel, okay, Tel Aviv and Israel, all right, the small hats, how they wanted, okay, and ultimately the small hats needed a timeout. They need this ceasefire, okay, because, they're suffering. All right, the missile defense is getting more and more depleted. Okay, so they needed a timeout, and America, did this thing to buy more time for the small hats. They did this attack. Okay, it wasn't an attack to, to cause a great reaction out of Iran. That's why it was so irrelevant. The things that they did that on purpose. Okay, and I say Iran knows that. Okay, if it goes into a two-front war with America and the small hats, that it can stretch itself thin. So it has kept its focus on the small hats. All right, and as long as America, doesn't truly get aggressive, the main focus gonna be the small hats. Okay, you see, they like I say Iran knows. Okay, this is political. Okay, this is political. This wasn't an act, to this wasn't a attack, to do harm, but it was a thing of saving face. So now, you have a few hours, ago, so-called ceasefire supposed to win in place, and then you have, now rumors that the ceasefire has been broken. So the next few days will tell, because the ceasefire really is not a ceasefire. Okay, now I want to go here. Okay, just to show you. All right, but what this also does too, it puts let me see. It's another video I had. I must have X'd out by. I want to get this one here. You know, here you go. So you don't see a full out, you don't see a full out blown war between America and, okay, let's go here, and Iran, because let's go here. Yeah, I had to pull it up earlier, so luckily let me pull it back up. And he's going to go into what people are calling, ceasefire. People are just, praising Donald Trump like, oh, Trump went over there and called them to ceasefire. He broke it up, But we're gonna get into that. So let's go here. All right, but what this does is put America, all right, in the crosshairs of Iran, to prepare more. And see, with this, when you do a ceasefire, it gives both, military time to regroup. And see, now you best believe Iran, is strategizing, okay, for how to deal, okay, with America, okay. You best believe they're putting strike packages together for America, so it's not, immediately back and forth between Iran and America, but you best believe there's preparations now, because now they know America, okay, is going to eventually get involved in this thing, okay, and they put Russia on notice, they put China on notice, all right, so you best believe, they're preparing, okay, to counter America, okay, because America just showed their cards. They will directly get involved with this thing for the sake of the small hats, okay? So you best believe, that's been noted amongst the allies of Iran, which mainly is China, okay, Russia, okay, even Pakistan, North Korea, okay. So let's play this. There's another guy. All right, and I said this is before the so-called ceasefire. Then we're gonna go to a video after the ceasefire. They expound on it a little bit. But this was right after Trump ordered okay the strike on Iran.
Our first guest is retired U.S. Army Colonel, author, and defense and foreign policy consultant, Colonel Douglas McGregor. Colonel, if they'd consulted you before last night, what would your advice have been to them?
Well, it wouldn't have been a strike, and we would not now be at war with Iran. And I think the most important thing for your audience to understand is something that most Americans don't understand, George. The United States is now at war with Iran as Israel's critical and ultimately only real ally. It's very important to understand that, because this is something that Israel, its lobby, and ultimately its agents in the United States have tried to bring on for 30 years. They've now achieved it, which explains why Mr. Netanyahu last night was almost giddy in his response. He knows that he's finally got what he wants, because this war is going to expand. It's going to take time. How long is anyone's guess, and it could have terrible consequences. So I think there was a failure at the policy-making level to understand what they were doing. And if you listen to Trump, this is not a man who wants the war. And so instead of a strike going in, even though this had been rehearsed for innumerable times over many years, even though they'd rehearsed it and practiced it, what they ultimately did was harm nothing and accomplish nothing. They hit the equivalent of empty buildings, empty targets. And then after doing so, he announced that he was now ready for peace, which is the ultimate expression of self-delusion. He now has a full-blown war on his hands. But until the Americans are hurt in some demonstrable way, most Americans will not understand this, and they don't understand it, George.
That's a big mystery. Of course, as I said in my monologue.
And he made a major point, Americans don't have a clue, okay, of what's really going on. A lot of Americans, they take this thing as a joke, something to make a video about on social media, but they have no clue, all right, the door, all right, that America has just walked into, okay? And it's not, we're not going to see the direct back and forth between, Iran and America just yet, but it's to come, okay? This is the beginning, okay, of the war that's going to turn America to a desert, okay? And like he said, until Americans are hurt, all right, they're not going to understand what's really happening, okay? As long as they have their daily convenience, they don't care about the decisions being made abroad, okay? But the decisions that's being made over there, okay, in the Middle East, okay, or Western Asia, you see, there's going to be grave consequences for the American population soon, okay? One of these days is going to be grave consequences, okay? Economy collapse all the way up into the time of this place being nuked, man. Okay, see, people don't look at this conflict, and see that the the end game is America being nuked. Matter of fact, the brother got this precept. All right, and if a brother could post that in is that Proverbs 14 and 12. Okay, and then the simple believe every word. This is Jeremiah 49 and 20. This from the brother Hebrew Israelite men endure to the end. It says, therefore hear the counsel of the Lord that he have taken against Edom. And see, and that's the beautiful thing about being in the spirit, to understand these things that the Lord and his counsel, which you go into the Lord's counsel, it can be explained in prophecy. Understanding prophecy is an understanding of the Lord's counsel. This is what, the heavens have declared to happen in the earth, when you read prophecy, man. Okay, so as we hear the counsel of the Lord, he's against Edom. Okay, which is this whole system. This is an Edomite system that runs the earth. So this whole system the Lord is against. Okay, and this war is going to tear this system apart. Okay, and Yahweh Shai is coming to finish it off with the chariots, man. Okay, said that he have taken against Edom and his purposes that he have purpose against the inhabitants of Teman, surely the least of the flock. Okay, surely the least of the flock. Okay, where we go? Yeah, it says, surely the least of the flock shall draw them out. Surely he shall make their habitation desolate with them. Okay, so this is where we at, where the Lord is going to make the habitation of America desolate. Okay, emptied out. Okay, and people don't have a clue of what's been or what's all right, what path that they're on. They have no clue what path that Donald Trump, okay, has just embarked on, man. Okay, it says, Proverbs 14 and 15. All right, it's the brother Damawati, GMS in his likeness. It says the simple believe every word, but the prudent man look well into his going. And there's a lot of people that's just running, with the narrative of Western media, as if Trump just went over there and just kicked ass, made, small hats in Iran both sit down, and there's peace. No more World War III now. There's a lot of people under that impression that World War III has been solved by what Donald Trump did. Simple as hell. People are simple as all goddamn hell in America, man. Okay? They don't know how anything works. They don't know any history. They don't know any geopolitics. They don't know any goddamn thing. Okay? But what's reported to them, okay, in a CNN sound bites of Trump, okay? Verse 16, it says, a wise man feareth and departed from evil, but the fool rageth and is confident, man. And this is what we're seeing now. People are confident. Okay, they believe that they have a strong, president. They believe Trump, has just, quail, the path. They just think that Trump just changed course and took them off the path of World War III. No, he stepped into that. Because like I said, just because there's not immediate, response, from Iran to escalate with America, well, best believe what America did is noted. And now the other side, okay, is putting together a counter for America's involvement in this war, because America just showed that they will get directly involved, all right, in this war, all right, within this timeline, man. Okay, and that's what the scriptures say. Okay, so let's let this play some more.
The IAEA say there's no radioactive material in the atmosphere. There's no sign of emission. And so either there was no material there in the first place, or it did not succeed in getting anywhere near it. And the Israelis are beginning to say that now. Channel 13 this evening said that you cannot destroy Iran's nuclear program by bombs, in which case, why go to war with them?
Well, I tend to agree with you, but there are two things that are now very clear. Number one is that Iran is going to double down on its war with Israel. In fact, within the next 2 weeks, I'd be surprised if Israel is not entirely destroyed. Secondly, Iran is receiving and will continue to receive enormous amounts of aid and support, particularly from Russia and China. Three, the Iranians have now collectively decided to close the Straits of Hormuz. There are 50 oil tankers sitting in the Gulf, packed or filled with oil, ready to transport through the Straits of Hormuz. They're not going to move. They're going to sit there. They are now hostage to the closed straits. What are we in the United States going to do about that? Well, frankly, we don't draw on the oil from the Gulf for the most part. It's not going to make much difference to us, at least in the short run. But this is going to have a terrible impact on the rest of the world. There has been no thinking, once again, about the long-term strategic consequences. There was no thinking about, is this the right way to achieve the aim? Because if you're an Iranian right now, you're going to do everything in your power to build a nuclear weapon. In fact, I would argue that there will be countries all over the world that will now build nuclear weapons because they don't want to be visited by the United States Armed Forces in the middle of the night. We are the threat. We are the rogue state supporting the other rogue state, Israel.
So he said, look, he made a good point that now this is going to make, nations that don't have nuclear weapons, to get nukes, because that's the only deterrence, okay, from America is nations that have, the bomb, as they say. Okay, America hasn't invaded any nation that has the bomb. Okay, North Korea, all right, Pakistan, these nations have the bomb. So it's like when you don't have the bomb, okay, they play with you out here. Okay, so now this is pushing the world, all right, towards obtaining nuclear weapons. Nations that don't have them to obtain nuclear weapons, man. Which all this plays into the prophecy, man. That's why we gotta stick to the prophecy, man. Damn all these different reports. And so I say it's a lot of misinformation. Stick to the things that complement prophecy, man. So you can see more nuclear, weapons being acquired by different nations, man. Okay, and then another thing, America and Israel is being isolated as these rogue states. They're just doing what they want to do. Trump, he's not even, what he did, he was supposed to go through Congress, man. Showing you that he's moving like a king, showing you that there's a Caesar coming back, an ancient Caesar, all right, that's back in office, man. Because he's moving, all right, like a king. He's not moving as a president. Okay, and showing you that the government is fully corrupted because there's no uproar for what he did and how he moved. So let's let this play some more.
And then finally, no mention is being made in this country in any way, shape, or form of what's happening in Gaza. There's a complete failure to understand that Gaza is the catalyst for the larger war that's now going to begin against Israel. Every Muslim country is going to come on board against Israel, along with Russia, along with China. I'd be surprised if Mr. Putin doesn't make it very clear to Mr. Netanyahu that if he contemplates using a nuclear weapon, he needs to understand something. If you do this, if you use a nuclear weapon against Iran or anyone in the Middle East, we will use a nuclear weapon against you. I'd be very surprised if he has not already said that. We don't understand what we've walked into because we're not informed. We still think this is 1991. Listen to the rhetoric. I'm ready for peace now. We've made our point. We hope the Iranians understand us and will make peace. Have you lost your mind? The war is now just beginning.
Yes, it's not the beginning of the end. It's merely the end of the beginning, as Mr. Churchill said. Now, the impact of all this on Donald Trump's popularity. All the hypocrites are coming out. Nancy Pelosi is denouncing this lawless act of brigandry. All the Democrat hypocrites who would have done exactly the same thing. Of course, they represent nearly half of the American people. And therefore, how many of Trump's voters now desert him is going to be a huge factor in the midterms, isn't it? Its impact on MAGA is surely going to be significant, because this is a total about face for the Donald Trump that people thought they were electing. This is the man who denounced the Iraq War, who denounced Obama, accused him of being ready to go to war with Iran in order to win an election. This is the Tulsi Gabbard who said just weeks ago that in terms there was no case for this kind of an action. When people do an about face like that, they must lose a part of their base. How do you quantify that, Colonel?
Well, the desertions from so-called MAGA have already begun, because MAGA turns out to have been a myth. Let's be frank, it was never real. People voted for something that was never real. You've got to go back to the Republican National Convention. And during the Republican National Convention, there was a giant Israeli flag on the wall. And there was a placard above the flag that said, Israel first. And then a gentleman walked out to the podium, ostensibly representing the Israel lobby, and tried to lead cheers for Israel first. Well, the response was tepid, to say the least. But the people that voted for Donald Trump didn't understand what they were listening to. The signal was unambiguous and clear. You were voting for Israel first. And that's what you got for a cabinet. That's what you got for a government. Now, as you point out, that applied equally to the other side, regardless of what the other side says. We have a government in Washington that is corrupt to its core. It's corrupt, it's ineffective, it's incompetent. And that's what we are now going to discover in the days and weeks and months ahead. The whole place is going to come apart, because this war is going to expand. The family dictatorships that controlled the Arabian side of the Persian Gulf are not going to survive this. The Saudis are at high risk. Why are they at high risk? Why is King Abdullah in Jordan at high risk? Because there are hundreds of millions of Muslim Arabs that are saying this is unacceptable. This must stop. And you're going to see new governments come online. We are going to lose everything as a result of this overseas. We are inevitably going to be driven out of the Middle East, the thing that everyone said we were fighting to prevent. And we're going to watch Israel be destroyed day after day after day. This, in other words, the world is going to be turned upside down. Everything that we've supposedly worked for decades will be lost. Now, in the long run, this is a damn good thing for us.
All right. So as you can see, he went into how MAGA, was, all right, a myth, and you people, all right, what you rallied behind was a Zionist / technocrat, and Donald Trump, because he's leading you to a technocracy and he's leading you to a war, all right, on behalf, all right, of the small hats, So this is what you got, with your 47th president, was a Zionist / technocrat, in the interests of America, all right, is not on the agenda, because he just stepped into a door that leads to America becoming a desert, all right. Now let's go here, because they've been talking about, this ceasefire, well, there's a lot of confusion into what this ceasefire means, because matter of fact, let's play this. This is a guy who's into run. This guy Dr. He's from America, but he lives in Iran. Let me see. All right, so you have this guy, um, Dr. Muhammad Morandi, so he's in Tehran, so he's giving, his perspective of what's going on and dealing with the ceasefire and different things. So let's play a little bit of this. We'll jump around, get to the point.
Iran, what many are saying is a symbolic attack on the U.S. airbase in Qatar. But over the last 24 hours, we saw Israeli media leaking out saying that they were seeking an end to the conflict after the U.S. airbase attack by Iran. We had an announcement of a ceasefire by Donald Trump. We had a massive missile attack on Beersheba and Tel Aviv in many surrounding areas. The scores of Israelis killed. I believe there was 11 or 13. There's conflicting reports in one missile strike alone overnight. And now the ceasefire appears to be in effect. Or please correct the record, Professor Morandi. What has been going on and how do you see this?
Well, you're right. The Israeli regime was seeking a ceasefire even before Trump carried out his own aggression and his own act of war against Iran. The Israeli regime began this unprovoked war with a blitzkrieg attack and the foolish belief that they could undermine Iran, defeat Iran. And although they scored some successes in the first hour, obviously, when you carry out an act of aggression that's unprovoked, you will have successes. They murdered a lot of innocent people. They murdered senior officials and their families and their neighbors, which of course is not important for the West or the Israeli regime, as we've seen in Gaza and Lebanon. But they failed. The Iranians regrouped. They started hammering Israeli cities. They started firing drones and missiles. And till the very end, the Iranians were firing lots of drones and lots of missiles, especially during the last 2-3 hours. And it's not a ceasefire agreement. The Iranians have said that we are halting fire, and if the Israeli regime makes any move, we will restart the conflict. So I don't know exactly what sort of technical term that would have. But the Iranians have warned the Israeli regime that if it fires at Iran, if it shoots at Iran, they'll be hit back very hard. But I think it's a failure for the regime. The United States and the Israelis have not destroyed Iran's nuclear program. Iran has many scientists. A lot of its assets are intact. We'll have to see what really happened in Fordo. And Iran has been provided an excuse not to cooperate with the IAEA like before anymore. And but most importantly, I think this shows the vulnerability of the Israeli regime. For the first time ever, they've been hammered and hammered unrelentlessly. And Netanyahu was seeking a way out. The Iranians, of course, don't want a regional war. They don't want a global economic collapse, but they wanted to humiliate the regime and humiliate Netanyahu. And I think that's exactly.
Is your child struggling with a gaming addiction? Major companies behind games like Minecraft, Fortnite, and Roblox.
What happened?
Perhaps you can talk about the timing of this, because as of now, what Israel is saying, Israel Katz, the defense minister of Israel, is saying that Israel will strike, and how even Donald Trump is saying Israel don't strike. But at the same time, of course, there really is no ceasefire when it comes to Israel. That word seems anathema to their vocabulary with what we've seen in Gaza and Lebanon already. But talk about the timing of this. Why now? Why is it that Iran and Israel, or at least Israel and Donald Trump, are coming to this conclusion that a ceasefire is necessary?
Well, Iran doesn't want to unnecessarily prolong a war and have civilians killed, because after all, this regime is murderous. And it just last night, it was just randomly bombing places in Tehran. They bombed a hospital that I would guess from where I am right now is a 1 hour walk, less than an hour probably, just a walk, an ordinary walk. You get there. It's a street that if you go, it's actually pretty straight from here, pretty straight. So they bomb hospitals. They bombed in a town in the north of Iran, a small city. They slaughtered 2 entire families and brought down the building. That's how the regime is. So Iran doesn't want to just continue the war for the sake of it. They humiliated the regime. The regime wanted a ceasefire. Iran got what it wanted. It humiliated Netanyahu. It severely weakened him, and it weakened the regime, because this is the first time that you see Israeli society fall apart, and that they cannot, they cannot just bomb like they do in Gaza, or even in 2006 when they lost the war against Hezbollah. Ordinary Israelis were doing more or less their own thing, and the fighting was being carried out in Lebanon. This is the first time that the war has been seriously brought to occupied Palestine, throughout occupied Palestine, with heavy missiles, much heavier than the sort of missiles that the Israelis have been firing at Iran. These are long-range missiles with huge payloads. So Iran humiliated the regime. It also has been provided an excellent excuse to change the nature of its relationship with the International Atomic Energy Agency. That will be very useful in the future, because the agency has shown itself to be dishonest. It has shown during this period, it has refused to condemn the United States or the Israeli regime for striking nuclear sites, and for bringing about the threat of radiation leaking and harming huge numbers of people. They are indifferent. The Europeans are indifferent. They supported it. So because of this, Iran now has new leverage. They can do things with their nuclear program without without having the International Atomic Energy Agency pleased about it.
So what he's speaking on with the IAE, International Atomic Energy Agency, that's who Iran, will have to check in with, to monitor, their nuclear facilities, making sure that they're just peaceful nuclear facilities for energy. Okay, and what happens is that's why America and the small hats were able to have information on Iran and facilities, their whereabouts, their different scientists, because the IEA is supposed to be an independent agency that just monitors nations nuclear programs if they have one. Now what what the IAE was doing was they was giving information to the small hats in America. And that's why it was so easy for them, to kill the scientists and different things, because the IAE, is a corrupt agency. And now Iran is stepping away from them. So now they're not even going to check in with the IEA about their progress of their nuclear facilities. So Iran is going to go black with that. Okay. And this whole thing, see, Iran has pummeled. They've taken this opportunity these last 9 days to just pummel, all right, Tel Aviv and destroy, all right, infrastructure, mainly military infrastructures and intelligence infrastructures of the small hats. Okay. So they, done major damage in these last, 10 days. Okay. So now with this ceasefire, which I'm gonna fast forward because it's really not a ceasefire. All right, it's just they just halted. Okay, the back and forth, but there's no document, so they haven't sat down and reached an actual agreement with a ceasefire. Okay, matter of fact, I want to fast forward. You want to expound on that. Let's see.
Curious on what you believe is most important here as we come into this next phase of what I believe is a conflict and, of course, a regional situation that is far from resolved.
Yes, there was some confusion, and I'm not sure exactly what was meant by 4 a.m. And there was no ceasefire in the sense that there was a ceasefire agreement, and that the two sides have some. There's only a cessation of hostilities. In other words, there's no shooting. But if the Israeli regime does anything, Iran will fire back immediately. And the Iranians have already said that they violated the ceasefire on 3 occasions. So there's not an agreement where, right now it's just the two sides stop shooting. And no one can be sure about what's going to happen tomorrow. And the Israeli regime has already made new threats. And Iran said, if you fire at us, we will hit you back very hard. So we have to see now what happens inside Israel, because Netanyahu is definitely in trouble. He did not get what he wants. Iran has its scientists, it has its nuclear program, it has its military, and it has its missile defense that was hitting the Israelis hard till the very, very end. So we'll have to wait and see. Israel is not a regime that sits quiet and behaves like a country. It's an expansionist, murderous, racist regime. And Iran is, as we speak, preparing itself for potential future conflict. Have no doubt that Iran is going to be very swift in dealing with its deficiencies, in defensive deficiencies, and strengthening its offensive capabilities.
Talk about what some are concerned.
So yeah, this whole talk of a ceasefire, there's no Trump jumped on camera like he just got both sides to sit down and sign paperwork and come to an agreement. All right, and what these nations do, they talk through back channels, and ultimately there was a understanding like, look, Iran pretty much said, look, we'll stop shooting, okay, and if they stop shooting, but if they do anything, we coming right back hard. If the small heads do anything, we coming right back hard. So it's a very fragile, agreement, through back channels of some form of ceasefire. Okay, well, it's not an official ceasefire. All right, and usually the small hats, they break all their ceasefires. Okay, so yeah, that's just getting things caught up. So now we'll look and see how this ceasefire gonna hold up. Because all it takes is one bullet. All right, if one rock get tossed, from one side to the other, okay, they're gonna be right back at it. All right, so let's get a couple of precepts. We'll close out. It's in Revelation 9-12. It says the first terror is past. This is the NLT. But look, 2 more terrors, all right, are coming. Okay, and those 2 more terrors are talking about 2 other wars, which one of those 2 terrors has passed. So now we're just waiting on the last terror, all right? Because this 3rd World War is going to be a terror to the earth, man. Okay? It's going to be a lot of destructive weaponry brought to the world stage in this 3rd World War, leading all the way up into the nukes. Okay? So no matter what, they're saying about no more World War III, is you goddamn crazy. Okay? That's a guarantee. Okay? Now this is because this is the Lord doing. This is Zephaniah 3:8. This is in the NLT. Says, therefore be patient, says the Lord. How about Shemal Shah? Soon I will stand and accuse these evil nations, man. So the Lord, all right, has an accusation against all these nations, man, because all of them are, complicit in this new world order, okay, and also the suppression of the true Israelites, okay. It said, for I have decided to gather the kingdoms of the earth, all right, and pour out my fierce anger and fury, okay, on them, okay. All the earth will be devoured by the fire of my jealousy, man. So the Lord, all right, as the scripture says, is mustering the host of the battle. Okay, the Lord is gathering these nations into the region, because with this conflict, you're seeing nations from other regions come into, okay, what they call the Middle East, China and Russia, okay? I say North Korea, all these different nations are being sucked into this region. European nations, America, all these nations are being gathered, okay, by the will of Yahweh Shema Shai, okay? So we're just going to continue to watch and see, how these things play out. There's a lot happening, fast, and we're going to continue to stay on it, through the spirit and power of Yahweh Shema Shai. So, Lord will you, brothers. All right, and you sister edified. Till next time, we'll say Shalom. Going Mashallah. Abba, Shalom.